Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. In this episode, we hear from Ambassador Riyad Mansour, the Permanent Observer of Palestine to the United Nations, and a strong voice for his people amid the escalating violence in the region. As the conflict intensifies, we ask, is the world turning its back on Gaza, much like it has forgotten Ukraine? Can international courts ever hold Israel accountable? And what role does Saudi Arabia's bold new coalition play in the pursuit of a two-state solution? Ambassador, thank you for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. Now, I want to start with the recent developments in the region. A year on from October 7, things seem to be getting only more complicated, particularly with the escalation in Lebanon. Frankly speaking, do you fear that Gaza will soon become a forgotten conflict in much the same way that many in the world seem to have forgotten about Ukraine?
Well, I hope not. First of all, thank you for having me on your program. I hope that after 1 year of these atrocities against our people in the Gaza Strip, not to become a forgotten subject. In the contrary, we have a momentum at the United Nations, and we hope that that momentum will be culminated in putting in place a ceasefire and the beginning of sending humanitarian assistance to the scale needed by our people in the Gaza Strip, and the process of allowing the people of Gaza to go back to the places where they were forced from, and to provide them with shelter, since winter is approaching. And after we succeed in doing that, I hope that we will begin a process of political horizon. In this connection, the historic advisory opinion of the ICJ and the very detailed and powerful resolution adopted in the General Assembly would move us in connection with political horizon from reaffirming principles, which is important, to beginning the process of the implementation of ending this illegal occupation and having the two-state solution become a reality. Of course, we said within 1 year, but we need to see clear indications of the beginning of Israel changing its illegal policies and practices which violate our rights, the rights of the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestinian territory, and also the right of the refugees as well as part of the Palestinian people.
Well, some hugely ambitious goals there. And of course, one cannot compare Gaza to anywhere else in the world today, given the sheer amount of destruction and death. Now, in a recent statement, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal Al Farhan, he said that impunity has emboldened Israel to go on its rampage in Gaza as well as Lebanon. Tell me, how confident are you that the international courts, as they are set up today, will actually be able to hold Israel accountable?
Well, the court did its job, and they gave us a historic advisory opinion that we went to the General Assembly as the court requested the General Assembly and the different parts of the UN to develop modalities for ending this illegal occupation as rapidly as possible. So we translated that in the resolution adopted in the General Assembly by saying this illegal occupation to end as rapidly as possible. It should end within 12 months. And then we put obligations based on that advisory opinion upon the UN and all of its parts and the national states, because there are many things that they could do. For example, those who provide weapons, they should stop sending weapons to embolden Israel and to allow it to continue with this illegal occupation and this, genocidal war against our people in Gaza, among other things. So therefore, there are many details within that resolution based on the ruling of the ICJ that if countries and the UN and companies and agencies to abide by all these obligations, then we will begin to see a shift in the situation, in the direction of ending this occupation and allowing the
Ambassador,
Palestinian
with
people
all due
to attain
respect,
their
you know,
rights.
we've certainly seen these rulings from the courts so far, and we've seen you repeatedly go to the ICJ. But in terms of real action, are you confident that the courts, as they're set up today, can really hold Israel accountable and can really bring that justice? Because frankly, we have not seen that take place yet.
Well, see, the court it doesn't have an enforceability power. The enforceability power is in the hands of the international community, the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Human Rights Council, the contracting parties of the 14th Geneva Convention. And it is in the hands of national states. They are the ones who send weapons. They are the ones who could possibly buy illegal products from settlements. They can stop that. They are the ones who can put sanctions. They are the ones who can do many things in order to shorten the life of this illegal occupation. In the resolution that we've adopted, we put a lot of these things in place. We need now to do follow-up. And the first report of the SG, the Secretary General, will be within 3 months. We need to see from member states and also from different components of the UN, when he reports to us, to the General Assembly, then we will see how much these countries are and the UN is abiding to meet their obligations to force Israel to change behavior in the direction of ending this occupation. And then we will decide after that report what next that we need to do. If Israel to continue to disregard the ICJ ruling and the General Assembly resolution, then we will raise the temperature and resort to further steps in order to force Israel to comply with international law and the ruling of the ICJ and relevant UN resolutions.
But frankly, that diplomatic pressure is not working. We're not seeing Israel change its course. But let me ask you a bit more about the two-state solution. I mentioned there earlier Prince Faisal. Now, Saudi Arabia has been spearheading efforts very recently, which were very prominent at the now concluded UN General Assembly to enforce a two-state solution. Now, this also included a new international coalition to back it. What do you make of the Saudi efforts so far? And tell me, what's next for this coalition?
Well, you raised many issues. First of all, the pressure is started by adopting the resolution. We just adopted the resolution about 2 weeks ago. Secondly, we are very appreciative of what the Saudi Arabia is doing and the personal involvement of His Highness, you know, the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal. And, you know, the Prince, in all of his articulation, including in his press conference, announcing, you know, the formation of the International Alliance to implement the two-state solution, indicated that we need to implement the very important resolution of the General Assembly predicated on the historic ruling of the ICJ, which means that he realizes the importance of the details contained in that ruling. And if we succeed collectively in translating this ruling into the practical step that we are discussing as an action platform to force Israel to comply with the will of the international community, international law, and the ruling of the ICJ. In this connection, I think that we were pleasantly surprised when the committee, the ministerial committee of the Arabs and the OIC, led by the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, and Borrell on behalf of the European Union and Norway, when they called for a meeting on the implementation of the two-state solution, about 90 countries participated, among them 90 foreign ministers. And in it, it was announced the formation of the international coalition for the implementation of the two-state solution. And it was announced in a press conference led by Prince Faisal, accompanied by other leaders such as Borrell and our Prime Minister, and the foreign minister of Norway. And the prince announced that there will be soon a conference in Riyadh in order to adopt the action plan for moving, in the direction of taking all the steps necessary in order to either convince or force Israel to comply with this wish that this occupation has to end, and it has to end soon, to allow for the birth of the two-state solution, which means the independence of the state of Palestine, because one has been in existence since 1948-49. The other one is under occupation, and it needs to be independent. It needs to be a full member in the United Nations to have parity, and then to deal with all of the details that would lead to the evacuation of the settlements and the settlers, and all of the manifestation of this illegal occupation to allow for seeing the two-state solution becoming a reality on the ground. I think we are in the initial stages of all these practical steps.
And of course, Saudi Arabia has been pushing for the two-state solution for a long time now. And they've also been offering support in other ways. Very recently, they've announced they're going to be beginning monthly financial support to the Palestinians to try and address the growing humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Now, this is in addition to their ongoing support for Palestine. I think the aid is currently worth around $5.3 billion so far. Tell me, what was your reaction when you first heard this news from Saudi, and why do you feel it's so important?
Well, I was aware of the evolution of this very important step taken by Saudi Arabia, and I was aware of that step will take place because I was with the Prime Minister and with the President for about 1 week during the high-level meetings at the United Nations. And when the Prime Minister went in Amman to receive the first check, that was a significant practical step in the direction of having more help to assist our people who are in need of all kinds of help, particularly those in the Gaza Strip, and also to be the beginning of encouraging other Arab states to fulfill their obligation by implementing resolutions in the different Arab Summit conferences of giving a certain amount on monthly basis to the Palestinian Authority, to the state of Palestine, in order to meet its obligation, since the Israeli occupying authorities is stealing our taxation money and trying to destroy the Palestine National Authority and the Palestinian state through these illegal measures of depriving us of having our own income, so that this step is a very significant step in showing that it is not up to Israel to decide the fate of the state of Palestine, the Palestinian people, and the Palestine National Authority. It is, the international community, the Arab brothers led by Saudi Arabia, and also by the Palestinian people themselves. So it is extremely significant. We hope to see more from other Arab countries, and it is also interconnected with the assistance from the European Union, which also started with a substantial amount of money as part and parcel of a bigger package in order, to help the Palestinian people and the Palestine National Authority and the state of Palestine to meet their obligation towards their people, particularly toward our people in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, so clearly very much welcomed. Let me talk a little bit about the US role, because of course you're joining us today from New York City, where you're based. Tell me, what is your message to the US, who is applying tremendous pressure on Karim Khan and the ICC regarding the call for arrest warrants for Netanyahu? Tell me, do you also support an arrest warrant for the Hamas leader, Sinwar?
Well, you see, we do not interfere in the work of these international legal systems. We honor them, we respect them, we are party to them, particularly to the ICC, because we are a state party to the ICC.
Sure, but what's your position on it?
When we joined, we said that we want you to come and investigate all crimes committed on our occupied land, and also in Israel. And whatever you need from us, we will honor and respect the position of the ICC and the judgment of the ICC, so that we cannot pick and choose that these decisions of the ICC, those who are trying to politicize the ICC, they pick certain subjects that they support if it is in their favor, and they reject other parts if it is not in their favor, and therefore they are trying to make the ICC a vehicle in what they want. The ICC is supposed to be blind, like all courts, that
And
they
you feel
should
that's
follow
what
the law
America is doing
and
today?
implement their decisions and their
Ambassador, is that
constitution.
what you feel the US is doing today?
The US is, unfortunately, they could have stopped this war long time ago. They could have mustered enough pressure on Israel more than 3 months ago, when President Biden made his announcement of the 3 stages of the dealing with the situation in Gaza, starting with a ceasefire. And a resolution was adopted, 2735. 14 countries voted in favor. Nobody voted against it. And we are still not seeing ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And I believe that Netanyahu took the American leadership for a ride to drag them close to the election. And they are now more or less frozen, unable, the administration, to take significant decisions to stop this war. And he is, in essence, helping Trump to become the next president. And he will wait and see what the result will be after November 5th. In addition to that, he expanded the war into Lebanon, which we condemn, and we condemn this aggression against Lebanon, and it should be stopped immediately. And he created an environment to expand this war even further after what, with regard to Iran, because he wants to wreck the entire Middle East, if he can, in order to fulfill his selfish desire of remaining as Prime Minister of Israel and not going to jail, because he's facing 4 allegations of criminal activities that each one of them is enough to put him in jail.
Something we talked about a lot on this program, certainly Netanyahu's desire to continue to stay in power and avoid those corruption charges. But let me ask you a little bit about Hamas, because the US and the EU, as well as several other member states, say that because what Hamas did on October 7, that those events effectively rule out any involvement from Hamas in a post-war Gaza. What's your response to that?
Well, you see, my job here at the UN is to do everything possible, and I have been doing that along with all of my Arab brothers and Muslim brothers and all countries at the United Nations to stop this criminal war against our people in the Gaza Strip. I do not venture into internal politics. That is the job of the leadership in the Middle East. My job is to defend our people at the United Nations, to stop this war, and to work as hard as I can in order to implement the vision of the ICJ, and also to help the ICC to take practical steps in what they decided to do, and also to open a political horizon at the international arena of implementing the resolutions adopted by the United Nations.
Okay, well, you won't comment on whether Hamas should or shouldn't be involved in a post-war Gaza, but tell me, what's your relationship like with your American counterpart? What do you tell her when she says things like, as she did recently, that the Palestinians have no place to have a 2-state solution?
She doesn't say that the Palestinians do not have place not to have 2-state
Well, she said they don't have what it takes to have a 2-state solution.
Yes, but she is committed, and her administration, to 2-state solution. And in our conversation with her, those who are committed, and there is global consensus on the 2-state solution, you cannot stand still by reaffirming the principle. And when you see the Israeli occupying authority destroying the 2-state solution before our eyes, and you don't do anything, you have to do something. You have to stop the settlement enterprise, the illegal one, because it is illegal. You have to stop the annexation. You have to stop the denial of the Palestinian people their right to self-determination, and all the violations that Israel is committed. Because without these things, it becomes impossible to have two-state solution, which is in essence the independence of the state of Palestine. They are committed in generality to these principles, but they don't do things in practicality. And that is the differences between us and them. There is global consensus, I said, about the two-state solution, but we are not moving in the direction of implementing it. The resolution that we've adopted in the General Assembly based on the ICJ and the formation of the coalition, the global coalition, to implement the two-state solution led by Saudi Arabia, I think these are the beginning of turning the corner to begin the process of the implementation of this global consensus to end the occupation, to allow for the independence of the state of Palestine, and therefore to reach the moment of having two-state solution in reality on the ground.
Okay, well, tell me, each time the Security Council has failed the Palestinians this year, you took the matter to the General Assembly. Now, the majority of nations there have shown unwavering support for Palestine. Now, the latest ICJ resolution you submitted has garnered overwhelming majority support. How confident are you that those member states that voted are actually going to implement those steps on the ground? And how confident are you that Israel will be forced to withdraw from the West Bank within the next 12 months?
I live, in the United Nations 24 hours a day. I know the mood among my colleagues, the ambassadors representing all nations. I know the mood and the determination of the Secretary General. I meet and I see foreign ministers of different countries when they converge at the UN, as we did, just a few days ago. I see huge signs of hope that from the ashes of what is happening to our people, particularly in the Gaza Strip, and of course in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, I see there is a light of hope that this time, after we put an end to this war, that there will be a beginning of a political horizon and Israel will be forced, and it will continue to be isolated from almost all nations, including close friends to them. Now we need them to move in the direction of using the tools available to them to force Israel to change its policies and practices and to begin the process of ending this occupation and allowing for the independence of the state of Palestine, and therefore to make the two-state idea concretely a real thing on the ground. I am confident that this will happen. It happened with South Africa. It happened with all of the countries that went through the struggle of ending colonialism. The state of Palestine and the Palestinian people are not going to be the exception. We will succeed. It is complicated. It is difficult, but we have tremendous amount of help and support, globally speaking, including in the streets of the United States, among students in colleges and universities, and in all corners of Europe and all corners of the globe. All these things are not going to be wasted. All of these things will lead to breaking the back of this occupation, ending it, and therefore allowing for the independence of the state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and therefore have the two-state solution become a reality.
Well, clearly huge goals there, still a very far way to go. But let me pick up on what you said about isolation there, because the non-binding General Assembly agreements have shown that the US and Israel certainly are quite isolated on the world stage. But frankly, it feels like that isolation hasn't actually deterred Israel at all. Rather, to the contrary, Netanyahu seems to almost thrive on it. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, it appears that way. And as Nelson Mandela said, and it was quoted even by President Biden in his speech at the UN, it is not over until it is over, until it is done. It looks very complicated. It looks that Israel is so belligerent, but when we reach the tipping point where countries, as some of them in Europe, like Spain, Ireland, Norway, Slovenia, and others, started to see the light that, for example, admitting the state of Palestine to membership should take place at the beginning of the process, not at the end, as they used to believe. All these signs are giving us signals that we are getting very close to the possibility of opening the door to begin to see that this isolation and these practical tools available to all nations and the UN to be used, then they will start giving results to force Israel to change its behavior and to begin the process of ending this occupation, hopefully soon, in order to enjoy freedom and independence of the Palestinian people on the occupied land of the state of Palestine, and to have the state of Palestine completely free, full member at the United Nations, and to end this occupation in that process as well.
Well, let's talk about those conditions, because the demobilization of Hamas as a military group has been cited several times as a condition for the creation of two states, in which the security interests of both Israel and the Palestinians would be addressed. What would it take for the military wings of Hamas, Fatah, and other Palestinian factions to agree to demobilize? And frankly, is that even realistic?
You see, our narrative is there is no justification for killing thousands of Palestinian civilians, more than 42,000 in the Gaza Strip alone, and also possibly 10,000 under the rabbit. There is no justification for destroying Gaza. There is no justification for injuring more than 100,000 civilians.
Absolutely, but is it realistic to look at the demobilization?
What I'm saying is that we will not accept the narrative of Israel to make our struggle and our rights as if it's a security issue. It is an issue of giving the Palestinian people their national rights, including their right to self-determination, to statehood, and the right of the refugees to return. And the world is beginning to concentrate on these rights and the denial of these rights, which the ICJ examined thoroughly and came to the conclusion that this occupation is illegal and it has to be terminated as soon as possible.
Yes, but Ambassador, I'm talking about a different point. I'm talking about the demobilization of Hamas, Fatah, and other Palestinian factions. Do you think it's realistic to try and address this?
The first thing that we need to have is to end this aggression against our people. And even Hamas announced that they accepted the proposal of President Biden and the implementation of Resolution 2735. It is Netanyahu and the extremists in his government and the occupying authorities who do not want to stop this war and who want to expand it as they did in Lebanon and possibly even beyond. Therefore, the international community need to do everything that they can. They have tools to stop this war, and then we'll deal with all of the issues on the table in order to have peace, which requires the end of occupation, the attainment of the rights of the Palestinian people. When we have peace, we will not have extremists from everyone in order to allow the people to live in peace and harmony. We are not there yet.
Okay, well, let's change direction. In the recent week or two, we've now seen a real escalation between Israel and Hezbollah. How, in your opinion, has the killing of Nasrallah changed the regional equation and the trajectory of the war in Lebanon?
Well, I think that it is, you have to ask my Lebanese colleagues who are more qualified than me in order to address that issue. I am submerged in dealing with this aggression and brutality against our people in the occupied territory, especially in the Gaza Strip, and that is more than enough on my table and in my dishes before me in order to handle. So I am fully concentrating on that subject. I am not an analyst. I am a diplomat fighting for the rights of the Palestinian people through this international organization, which is fabulous, the United Nations, to try to save the future generations from the scourge of war and to have peace and to resolve issues through peaceful ways.
Okay, well, let me ask you a final question on Gaza then. You've said in an interview that you support the release of all the Israeli hostages held by Hamas and that you condemn the killing of innocent people. What would you like to hear from your Israeli counterpart in turn?
Well, first of all, they have to stop all these criminal activities and the genocidal war against our people. We need a ceasefire. That's number one. And also, we repeat saying that we condemn the killing of innocent civilians, regardless of their religion, the color of their skin, their nationality, and so on and so forth. I have repeated that many times, and I challenge the Israeli ambassadors over the years to repeat the same thing that I said, including in the Security Council. We also call for the release of the hostages and the release of the Palestinian prisoners. And it is contained in the resolution 2735 and the proposal of President Biden. So it's not only one segment of releasing the hostages, which we asked for that to be done, but also for the release of Palestinian prisoners. In fact, the only hostages that were released when they had exchange of prisoners, when we had about 5 or 6 days of suspensions of the fighting in November of last year. But when Netanyahu insisted or he claimed that he wanted to free the hostages through war, that led to killing more of them, and not after 1 year of releasing the remaining hostages. The way to release the hostages by stopping the war and by having exchange of prisoners and releasing all the hostages and releasing, the thousands of Palestinians who are in Israeli jails.
Well, let's hope that your calls for peace are heeded on a diplomatic level at last. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. We do appreciate your time.
Our job at the UN is to fight and work for peace. I am one of them, and I have been doing this all of my life, and I will not change course until I see the rights of the Palestinian people fulfilled completely.
Thank you.
Thank you.